Thank you. Cleaned up my space here, and it's got the recorder going, and it's good to be here. My name is Bill Crawford, and I'm an alcoholic. And y'all do get me down here about once a year, and that's no small deal. To be invited back over and over the years, that it's a true act of friendship from this group and some of the members of this group, and I appreciate it. I know what my job is. I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to share with you my story. And that's how this thing, as I understand it, works from the beginning. That from your experience, matching up with my experience, and your solution to overcome those things that we talk about that are part and parcel of alcoholism, is really kind of how it makes this thing, it's the root of how this thing works. And so we share with each other our experience. Alcoholism, if you're new, probably you're going to learn more about the human condition as it applies to what we call alcoholism than if you went to some fine school of addictionology or any of the things that academics do, because the true experience, the true living this disease and the recovery therefrom happens in rooms like this. So I'm honored to be back. As I said, I came up, I often say I came up in a home with a dual problem. We had alcoholism and Southern Baptism right there in the same house. And I know that's not unique. Many of us talk about, sometimes we make fun of or look back with disdain on some of our religious training. And sometimes we blame the Baptist church for some of my hang-ups. People from up north, and I know a lot of people who are from the northern part of the country, moved down here. They say the same thing about the Roman Catholic Church. And I tell them, you know what they call a Catholic in the South? A Baptist. It's the same deal. But thank God for what I learned, and thank God I believe what you learned at your mother's knee, I believe gives us a jump start when we come here. No matter how much I want to say I turned away from that and I found a real God here, really I found the same God here. Because when I came here and heard you sharing your experience and talking about God, I said to myself, I've heard this before. And so you were giving me the same truth. So thank God for that beginning. That before I turned into what I fancied myself as an agnostic, before I turned away from anything valuable, good, I was taught these things. I came along, I had trouble from the beginning. I hear your stories and you tell me that problems didn't start with the use of alcohol. Very often the solution started with the use of alcohol. I came along in a time way back. I just realized I've been in this program probably longer than most of you have been alive. And it's hard to imagine back in the dark ages when we were just 1A. And it's hard to imagine a kid like me with the frustrations and the problems I had adjusting to authority and pleasing the system. There were no diagnoses back then. I've got a grandson who's been diagnosed with everything, ADD and sensory integration disorder and all kinds of things. And many of the children now are. And I always say I came along before Ritalin. I came along during paddling, which was the treatment of choice at that time. And if I had to match up the punishment with the crime, I could very seldom do that. I would want to please authority. I didn't want to be in trouble. I didn't want to have to stand out in the hall during class or stand by a tree during recess or get a paddle in, this kind of thing. But somehow I just couldn't adjust, couldn't sit still, keep my mouth shut. And so you know how in our book, Bill says that part of the symptoms of the progression of our condition is we sought lower companionship. And I believe that. I was doing that in the 3rd grade. I didn't know that that's what I was doing. But I know now that we find our element. We find the people like us somehow. And when I hit puberty, as we do, and things got a little bit more complicated with the body and the mind and this kind of thing, I was associating with the group of guys that were like me. And they were teaching me how to smoke Lucky Strikes and inhale without collapsing. And they hung around in front of Man's old Henry drugstore, and I hung around with them and dressed up like a cat with the ducktail hair and all that, and they were drinking. Now, I had nothing good about beverage alcohol in my repertoire. Everything that I knew about the use of beverage alcohol was negative and bad. What I saw in my home, and my father was a gentle and kind man, and not a violent or profane alcoholic, but still the insecurity, the fear, those things, the embarrassment, those things that go along with a family living with alcoholism was just as true. Also, with my religious training, there was nothing positive about the use of alcohol. But something that I know now is peer pressure. The need for me to be included, the need for me to be among them and to be like them was greater than any fear and guilt that I associated with beverage alcohol, and I began to drink because they were. I was a social drinker for a while. A lot of people don't understand social drinking. I think I do. For about 6 weeks, I was a social drinker. Because I would drink a swallow of this and a half a can of that. But one night, I was 15 and a half years old. I was at the Green Hill Cemetery with Charlie and Sonny. We would go down to the cemetery at night for privacy to do all kinds of things. And that night, we had cheap wine. And I ingested enough of that cheap wine for the first time to know intoxication, to feel it. And the magic it does to us happened that night. Now, what is that? They've studied us to death. They have great brains. Millions of dollars of government grants and otherwise have come to situations, to people to discover what is this mystery. Dr. Silkworth in the big book tries to examine it. He didn't set out to do a scientific study. If you read the doctor's opinion in our book, he just managed a hospital that treated thousands of us. And he made observations that he just couldn't ignore. And he tried to understand the difference in us and those folks. My understanding that most of these experts who studied us and our condition think that about somewhere around 10% of people who use the drug alcohol have some sort of makeup in their system, mentally and physically, that they will addict to it, meaning it does something special for them and later cause problems. Or the way I like to put it, 9 in 10 waste every drop they drink. And we know them. They're everywhere. Yeah, we go to work for them. A lot of bosses are non-alcoholics, that 90%. We marry them, live next door to them. They outnumber us, so they're everywhere. And we mystify them. And they mystify us. Of all the zillions of dollars that have been expended to study us and our condition, to my knowledge, they've never spent one dime studying them. And there's more of them than us. And they confuse us. And so I took it upon myself to look into this. And not having a lot of money, no grants or anything, I used Kay, my wife, as my control group. Because she's as non-alcoholic as you can get. It's a hopeless case of non-alcoholism. And in our now we're down with our friends Jackie and Howard, and Jackie and Kay, if we go out for a special dinner for us, may drink a glass of wine, may finish it. It's high time somebody looked into that. So what I've done is say, well, she'll say, has said, because it's been many years since she's had more than that one glass of wine, she will say, when I start to feel it, I feel that I'm losing control, so I stop.
That's weird.
If you're new, you may have missed that. What she has said is, when I get the pilot lit, I stop. Can you imagine? Dr. Silkworth made a great, he was taken with the fact that once the pilot's lit, once we take a drink, something happens, a phenomenon of craving occurs. That when Bill Crawford takes a drink, I cannot resist drinking more and more and more. I crave the drink worse than when I have none, after I have one. Phenomenon, if you're new and hadn't heard what the definition of that big word is, that's something you see but you cannot explain. He saw it and couldn't explain it. I lived with it, so did you, and couldn't explain it. And I tried the things we tried. Now, my whole drinking career probably lasted not a minute over 14 years. I started drinking when I was 15 and a half years, and I found this program, or this program found me when I was 29. And at that time, thank God this has changed, but at that time, to come into AA at 29, I was very young. Very much below the mean of people who were coming in to Alcoholics Anonymous. And the older people, the people who had been around for a while, would say, aren't you smart to come in so early? And they would say, I drank for 40 years, and I think to myself, you didn't drink like I did for 40 years. Because I hit the ground running. What was the solution in the beginning very much became the problem. What happens to every alcoholic? Every alcoholic that drinks and continues drinking or quits drinking and comes here, it makes no difference at some point. What it's doing for him becomes secondary to what it's doing to him. Somewhere we meet that apex where what alcohol, the reward is outweighed by the price. That doesn't mean that people get well and quit. That people will sleep under a bridge tonight here in Southern Pines. That happened to a long time ago, and it doesn't mean that recovery is going to happen. But recovery is not going to happen, I think, unless it happens. That I reach that point and it's some moment of clarity that God gives some of us. I realize that this stuff is doing much more to me than it's doing for me. And long after that happened, I continued to drink. And I did the things that many of us do. That chapter, that paragraph in the big book, we took a trip, didn't take a trip, drank the fortified wine, drank the natural, all the things that we try. Basically, I tried all of those to have what it was doing for me and not pay the price of what it was doing to me. Because I had to have what it was doing for me. I had nothing else. I turned away from God. I didn't believe in God anymore, so I told myself. I turned away from things of value that were good. Kay was still there. Some people were still there and still cared. My parents at the time were alive. But I was losing any connection, real connection. Anything that was good to make my relationship with anybody was gone. And let me just kind of sum it up with this story, or maybe it doesn't sum it up, but illustrate with this story. I was working for a company and they sent me down to Atlanta to go to school for training for a week, to be followed up in a while after for another week of training. This was a new job and a new career, and as the guys, they were all men that were going through this school. And as guys will do if they're out of town and away from family and so forth, we went out and strip joints or whatever and just sort of having a good time. I got separated from the group, which I did a lot when I was in the group. And I was drunk. And they went back to the hotel and went to bed. And then in the wee hours of the morning, I'm wandering the streets of Atlanta trying to get back to the Carlton Hotel where they had housed us. And I just couldn't find it, and I couldn't find it. Finally, I got undressed and went to sleep. Not in the Carlton Hotel, however. I had dozed off on the front porch of that building in front of the Fox Theater down there in my underwear. Now, even a big city, sophisticated city like Atlanta, come morning time when people are going to work and somebody's asleep on the porch of this building in their underwear, it gains notice. And so the cop was waking me up holding my pants. And he said, "Aren't you ashamed of yourself?" We didn't have the time, nor did I have the vocabulary to tell him how ashamed, how deeply ashamed I was. Put me in the paddy wagon. And he took me to the Atlanta City Jail. Now, on a brand new job, when you're down for school, trying to make a good impression, it's a bad start. People from the school had to come and bail me out, and somehow I talked myself, when I was taken before the vice president that ran that school, I talked myself out of being fired. And as bad as that was, that next day, during that day, that evening, as soon as I could get a hold of some more of this stuff, I drank again. Not because I couldn't put two and two together that I was in the Atlanta City Jail and almost fired and embarrassed and humiliated because of drinking, because it was the only thing that make the demons go away. But the significance of that trip was not that. Many of us have gone to jail. Many of us have had humiliating, degrading experiences. What was significant about that trip, I think, because it's something that has stuck with me. I didn't know why until I came here, I guess. A young fellow about my age, and I was probably in my mid-20s, probably 25 years old, came up to me and said, "I live in Greenville, South Carolina. You live in Greensboro. Can I ride with you? I'll help you with the gas if you'll take me to Greenville." I said, "Sure, if you'll do the driving." And as we pulled out of Atlanta, and he was driving, and we were pulling out of Atlanta to go to 85 North to head back to our homes, he saw me reach under the seat and pull out that brown bag. And he looked at me like they look at us. And he said something like, "You really like that stuff, don't you?" And I said something macho like, "Yeah." And he told me this story, and like I say, I didn't know why it stuck with me. I think I know now. He'd gotten drunk one time at a college fraternity party or something. And he tore up a bathroom or something. It was just a horrible thing to him. It didn't sound so bad to me by then, but it was a horrible thing. And I remember he said to me, when I found out how I reacted to that stuff, what it did to me, I've never done that again. There were two guys in that car very much alike. We were both brand new on the same job, pretty much the same age, pretty much the same family situation. I think he was married with a couple of children just like me. A lot of similarities. Shake us up in the sack and you probably couldn't have told the difference. But one difference that separated us beyond any mutual understanding. Even both of us, neither, according to his report and certainly what he saw in me, neither one of us could drink. Not successful. That's what powerless over alcohol means. I can't drink and I can't not drink. I couldn't drink and he couldn't drink. But the difference that separated us beyond anything, any mutual understanding, was I couldn't not drink. I had made that decision, or thought I had 100 times by then, to not do it again. I had decided, I had made that pledge to myself and to others. I could not drink. None of us in this room, if we be alcoholic, can do anything about the fact that I cannot drink or you cannot drink. We don't celebrate anything about that in here. What this gives us, what this has given Bill Crawford, is I can now, because of the power of this program in God, I can now not drink. And I've been doing it for a long time. I'm going to try to hurry up and get sober. I talked the other night, stayed drunk all night long, so I'm going to try to get this thing turned around. Things begin to happen that weren't good. What it was doing to me was far greater than what it was doing for me. And the drunks were getting worse. I was losing everything of value that I should have retained and should have valued in my life. For one thing, I got fired by the same place, a straight commission job, fired by the same place 4 times. My drinking had become a problem. And so I had gotten to the place that my drinking turned into this kind of drinking. I didn't go out and have fun at the bars long. What would happen every termination of my drinking bouts with me being in the bed, drinking around the clock, seeking oblivion. There was no fun drinking. The fun drinking. Newcomers, and the same way. You look at those beautiful commercials on TV and they're enjoying that good silver bullet beer or that Bud Light. And they're having a good time. They're beautiful people. They're playing tug of war on the beach, and the girls have got bikinis. And you say, God, I miss the drinking. I want to be out with bikini-clad girls playing tug of war on the beach. And then I remember I never was out on the beach with them. Let me tell you about my fun drinking, especially beer. I would come to it whatever hour out of that stupor and make my way to where beer was, and if I had some in the refrigerator, I would grab that beer, and then you had to open it with a beer opener and get it open and try to put that fire out and drink as much as I could. And the gag reflex would hit me, and I'd blow it out my nose. That was the fun drinking that I had. So I've often thought, with equal time, to show the other side of the story, if they had one of those pretty women blow one out her nose to show it's not all on the beach at tug of war. Because my fun drinking was that, and that's what I must remember. Every current thought that I have now about alcohol, I must remember that I wasn't out frolicking with the beautiful people. I was trying to get a beer down and blow the foam out my nose. That's what I was doing. And tried to get enough down to put that fire out. I was working for this crooked company. And they sent me up to St. Louis for a couple of weeks to cover that office. And I stayed drunk for 2 weeks in St. Louis. Got on the plane to fly back. And couldn't get a drink on the plane. Can't even remember why. Maybe it's because of the condition I was in, but I was feeling bad. And Wallace alluded to this. I remember flying home and going to the airport lounge, and I had a little money, and I started drinking the beer, tapering off. Now, I had learned that if you drink for the period I did, that I would stay drunk for days on end, morning, noon, and night, around the clock, in oblivion if I could find it. And I had learned that when you quit drinking, it's bad. So I would taper off, and that's what Wallace was talking about. And I never got it exactly right, my dosage. I never had a nurse attending to this. I was doing it on my self-detox. And as Wallace said, my wife would never tell the difference in tapering off and drinking. It looks a lot alike. And I would tell her many times, no, I quit drinking yesterday. Today I'm tapering off. And what would confuse her is I'd overdose, tapering off, and have to start over. You know, as many of us have, I'm sure, have had to do. So I was tapering off in the airport lounge, and she picked me up, and I'm sure I made her stop somewhere to get, a few quarts of beer to go home to get into my detox regimen. And so she got me home, and it was a hot July day in the middle of July. And she and the kids went somewhere. They dropped me off or just went in briefly, and they had to do something. Got in my drinking attire, which is underwear. I drink a lot. And I always would end up in my underwear. And I was talking to my sponsor not too many years ago, and brought it up, and he explained that to me. I said, Dick, I always ended up in my underwear. He said, well, Bill, if people drink like you and me, quick decisions often have to be made during a drunk. And the less clothing you have on, especially if it's a bathroom decision, the better off you are. So, bingo, I said. Well, that's why I ended up in underwear. I was less to fool with the different things that I would have to do during these drunks. But I got in my underwear, and I was drinking my beer, and I remembered that when I was a kid, Mr. Hunter, Bill Hunter, an attorney in Greensboro, who brought Alcoholics Anonymous in 1947 to Greensboro. He had discovered it up in a treatment center or a psychiatric ward in Shelby, I think, and he brought it to Greensboro. He would come and see my dad, usually at my mother's request, but he'd come see my dad and try to entice my dad into going with him to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I remember his leaving that book, the book called Alcoholics Anonymous, that I even leafed through when I was in my teens. I opened up the phone directory and found Alcoholics Anonymous and dialed Alcoholics Anonymous. Maybe I had just enough beer in me to have the courage to do it, but I knew somehow that this stuff was doing much more to me than it was doing for me. It had been doing for a long time. And I dialed the phone, and back then, now we've got this fine intergroup office with all the, appointments for the chips and the literature and somebody manning it and this kind of thing. Back then, AA in Greensboro just hired an answering service who worked for a veterinarian and an oil company in AA. We were just one of the customers. And I dialed the number, and this lady answered, and I told her in some way that I was calling for help, and she said, well, you just wait there, and I have someone call you. And Wallace and Howard both remember Bill Norman. Bill Norman caught that call, and Bill called me. And we began to talk. And I remember during the conversation, I said, how long have you been without a drink? And it seems to me it was several years, 4 years or something, incredible length of time. And I said, how have you been able to do that? And he gave me the best answer one could have given a guy like me. He said, a man can do almost anything one day at a time. No preaching, no explanation really. A man can do almost anything one day at a time, and that rang true. As we talked, he recognized that I might be drinking. And he asked about that. And I said, well, no, not really. I'm just tapering off today. But he was about as narrow-minded as Kay was about that. He didn't want to rush to my aid in that condition. I'm glad and I'm grateful that that's the way he handled that particular 12-step call. But I took down his name and his number. And he said, when you're not drinking, then you call me. Kay got home, wherever she'd been, she called home. I had that name in. Hush. I've turned myself into the A&A, and this is the man's name and number. He and I agree I'm not ready yet, but when I am, I'm going to call him. She put the name and number in a safe place where she knew it was. And during one of those horrible times, sometime later, I don't know whether it was 3 weeks later, 3 months later, but sometime later, in a particular horror time that happens in the home of an alcoholic in his family, or her family, she got that number out of the safe place and she called. Now, she'd been doing other things. We'd had literature sprinkled around the house about this and that. She had reached out here and there. But this time she found herself, so she says when she's telling her story, she found herself talking to someone who not only understood, but who had a solution. And he listened to her sympathetically, as we do the family members of the alcoholic. But better than that, he said, hold the phone, I want you to talk with Liv, because Liv, my wife, goes to something like Al-Anon. And Al-Anon does her good. And Liv got on the phone and encouraged, urged, invited Kay to go to Al-Anon that Wednesday night, the following Wednesday night, and Kay went. And she was telling her story. She went to where there was a solution. You know, if somebody in the mess gets better, if something happens, doesn't have to, we zero in on that drunk. But if somebody just begins to do something called recovery, the whole game changes. Doesn't mean you'll cure the alcoholic. Doesn't mean the alcoholic's going to quit drinking because you go to Al-Anon. But if you're drinking like I drank, and your significant other, I like that term nowadays, your significant other gets involved in Al-Anon, it'll break your rhythm, I'll guarantee you that. Things change. Things change. I know what happened. Couldn't appreciate it then, but I know what happened now. That the power of my disease began to lose its power over her. Inch by inch, little by little, in small ways. But it began to have less power over her and thereby the rest of the family. My kids were 5 and 6 years old at the time. Coming off of that drunk, number 200, number 500, and when I came off drunks, it was bad. I not only felt bad and was sick and had the shakes and all the horrors that just come from the internal stuff coming off these things, but damage was done. I'd done stuff that hurt people. I'd put checks out at places that need to be picked up because they were no good. I did things that were harmful. Damage was done. And she looked at me and I'm in that state where I don't have anything to drink and I'm dying. And she looked at me and she said, can we call Bill now? Whatever months she'd been in Al-Anon, this was almost a year later. This was June the 2nd, 1967. That through this moment, thank God, is my sobriety date. And I said, yeah, because my defenses were down, and she dialed the phone. I always like to say this because so many young people in here, you never even remember the phones had holes in them back before you all were born. You used to have to get your finger in a hole and run it around. And she knew I couldn't do that 7 times, so she dialed the phone. And when he realized who it was, I'll never forget what he said, are you about ready to throw in the towel now? I said, sure am. This was a fairly late hour on a Friday night, so I said, I'll come see you in the morning. Classic 12-step call. Bill came in that house. That little house I was about to lose, the payment was $100 a month. I hadn't made them in a long time, and they were going to sell it on the courthouse step. And he came in the living room and acted like I was the most valuable person in the world. And he told me, he didn't ask me about me, he told me about him. And he made the deal that I hope we make with anybody that we're trying to help in a situation like this. Will you go with me to Alcoholics Anonymous tonight? There's a meeting tonight. My bag of tricks was empty. I didn't have another lie. I didn't have another delay tactic. And I said, I'll meet you there. I didn't want the AA van pulling up there and embarrassing me in front of the house. So I'll meet you there. And I did. Star Mountain Group. June the 3rd, 1967. I came into a meeting a fraction this size. But the same kind of meeting, open speaker meeting. Howard will tell you that maybe not quite as small when he came in, but when I came in, there were 11 meetings in Greensboro. 9 groups. Central met 3 times a week, so it added up to 11 meetings. Now there are 111, I guess, in Greensboro, but at that time there were 11. All but 2 were speaker meetings. Thank God I cut my teeth on speaker meeting. And a guy bellied up like I'm doing tonight and told the story we tell. I never tire of that. I still go to a lot of speaker meetings. I never tire of your story. And that's what I want to talk about in closing, is this experience that I was trying to talk about when I first got up here. What we do, the value of that. I couldn't have repeated a sentence he said after that meeting, but I understood his message. I knew that he was telling us that he had drunk alcohol hopelessly, just like I was doing. That he'd come here and he hadn't been drinking and life was good. I understood that. But better than that, a miracle was I believed him. And I hadn't believed anything or anybody in a long time. I didn't even believe in God, I told myself. That's what hooked me first. Alcoholics Anonymous, by definition, is a fellowship. That's what has to be first. If you just said, we're going to send you this book and read it and do what it says and you get straightened out, come on and meet some of us, I'd have died. No, first meet some of us. And those people after the meeting, when I came into the room, the big room where they were eating the cake and drinking the coffee, acted like I was the most important person there. That's the way we do. So I was hooked. Now let me tell you who came into AA. It's not like, I deal with people now. I end up sponsoring like many people. I deal with some new people that have to work AA in their schedule. They got soccer practice on Mondays and then I do this. I have to work it in. Maybe at lunch I can get there, that kind of. I told you I'd been fired from the same place 4 times. My days were free. Now all meetings were 8 o'clock. I had been kicked out of all the watering holes just about. Most particularly, the Bamboo Lounge. I had been kicked out for life from the Bamboo Lounge. Now, I don't know if you have a Bamboo Lounge in your town, but the Bamboo Lounge was not a place that you notch down from. That's it. If you've been kicked out of the Bamboo Lounge, you don't go to the next worst place. There is no next worst place. So my nights were free. I didn't have to work in AA. And then there were some nights where just one meeting, but I could get to a meeting every night. When you can't go back to the Varsity Grill, and you can't go back to the Bamboo Lounge, and you can't go back to Fletcher's Grill or Ivan House, these things, you just got spare time for Alcoholics Anonymous. So I went to Alcoholics Anonymous virtually every night. And these winners surrounded me and demonstrated what they did to me in a way that they lived. What happens to somebody like me? What must I know? I think that there's some things that the people I sponsor, and I try to share with them things I think that they must know to their core. What must I know? I've been sober a long time. I've been sober 48 plus years. I've been in AA a lifetime by most standards. But there's certain things that still may be in the forefront of my mind that I must know. I must know, first of all, that of myself, of my own power, my own volition, even after these long, long years of dryness, that I'm still powerless over alcohol. And what you taught me is the great truth, that you are powerless of yourself over alcohol, but the power comes from God, and you get that by doing this. I must know I am the problem. I work with people that forget they're the problem. Alcohol's the problem. So I ought to be able to have a little reefer. I ought to be able to take some of those pills. No, I'm the problem. Whatever chemical you put in me that does it for me is going to do it to me. And very likely lead me back to alcohol, which is going to kill me very fast. I'm the problem. I've got to know that this thing has to change. Y'all change this for me. You know, if you're at your third meeting, if you're at your first meeting tonight, something's changed already with you. The old timers used to tell me, if nothing else, screw up your drinking, but there's something that happens. If you grasp any notion that's shared tonight or at any meeting you've been to, something's changed, it's made you different. Doesn't mean you're fixed. You just have a chance to begin to be different. And I must know that. A big part of this thing here is my worst enemy. Put me on automatic pilot and I'm going to self-destruct. I like that part in the big book where it talks about I need to keep this on that right plane. That prayer, that short prayer that it has in the book, that it says, how can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine. And I must keep these thoughts. It even says that's the proper use of the will. You know what's killing most of us? Our will, our strong will, our hard-headedness, our rejection of anything good. That's what's killing me, was my will. And then Bill writes in that book, hey, there is one proper use, useful use of that will. Just keep those thoughts on that. And out of self, and out of anger, and out of lust, and out of self-pity, and out of dishonesty, and all the other things that can plague somebody like me. And I must know, and I mentioned this, and I'm going to sit down, I must know that this, as I said, by definition, is a fellowship. I must have the people. See, if I get away from you, if I quit coming to places like this with people like you, I'm going to quit doing the prayers. I'm going to quit working those steps. I'm going to quit saying that short prayer that I just mentioned. I'm going to quit reading that book. I'm going to quit everything of value that you taught me. Maybe not day after tomorrow or a month after next or whatever, but in time. I know. I had the flu one time in the 80s, and I missed meetings for 2 weeks because I was a sick puppy. And I got real squirrely. And I was telling a guy that I sponsored about sometime after that, I was saying, you know, I miss meetings. If something comes up and I can't help it, and I miss meetings for about a week, I get real squirrely. And he said, you're lucky. He says, it's the guy that misses a couple of 3 weeks of meetings and still feels okay. That's in the biggest danger. So all those good things that people like you have brought me, I treasure today. Thank God I treasure those. Thank God I know enough about what you've shared with me that I'll be sober the rest of this day.